World's End. A few days later, Bill Travers flew to Kenya for discussions with the Kenyan government about making the TV program. He was optimistic that the government would say yes to the suggestion. The program would be a good advertisement for Kenya and help attract more tourists. He also knew that African governments at the time wanted to show the world that they thought the protection of animals was important. On the other hand, lions have always been a natural enemy for Africans, and one of George Adamson's lions had recently hurt a child. Some people in the Kenyan government were against returning lions to the wild. They believed that lions which were used to being with humans were a problem. They might easily go up to people in game parks, and the results could be very dangerous. After a lot of discussion, the Kenyan government finally agreed. Christian could come to Kenya if a suitable place could be found. The area had to have water and enough wild animals so that the lions could hunt for food. It also had to be somewhere where there were no tourists or farmers and their animals. George began to search for an area which fitted the government's description. Bill returned to England and made plans to begin filming the following week. James Hill would direct the film, called The Lion at World's End. It would start with Bill and Virginia's first meeting with Christian, and then record the story exactly as it happened. The idea was to bring people's attention to the protection of wild animals. James told Ace and John to wear their most fashionable clothes and not to cut their long 70s-style hair. Ace and John said that they felt embarrassed about their appearance in the years that followed. As the shop was going to be closed for 2 days for filming, it would lose money. So Ace and John decided to do something generous for the owners. On Sunday, the day before filming began, they repainted the shop walls white. It took them all day. They were just finishing when Christian knocked the paint tin over. Christian was so surprised that he jumped back and fell over. Then he ran to the other end of the shop. There were white paw marks all over the black floor. Christian himself was covered in white paint, and he was going to be in a film the next day. Ace and John spent a long time that night washing the paint off Christian, who thought it was a great new game, and repainting the floor. The next day, Sophisticat was filled with lots of people and equipment and bright lights. Christian was confused by it all, but this made him quieter, and he cooperated well. Bill was very pleased with Christian's acting ability. Ace and John's voices, however, had to be re-recorded by Australian actors, because Bill thought Ace and John sounded too English. The second day's filming didn't go quite so well. They were filming in the church garden. This was Christian's special garden, and he didn't want to share it with all those people. He normally loved chasing footballs, but that day he refused to cooperate. He didn't like the noise of the slow-motion camera either. He stopped moving as soon as he heard it. In the end, Ace and John broke their rule about letting Christian chase them. It was the only way to get him to run. They ran, and he chased after them. This was the game that he had always wanted to play. He couldn't believe his luck. Ace and John went home, their clothes destroyed, but at least Bill had a good piece of film. Several days later, they all watched the film taken on those first 2 days. Christian looked wonderful, and the slow-motion parts were amazing. None of them had ever seen a lion in slow motion before. For the first time, they were really able to see how strong and powerful he was, and how perfectly he moved. But that was the last time Christian was able to exercise in the church garden during the day. Other people were starting to use the garden too, and Christian was getting too big and scary. The time Christian refused to climb down from the roof of a car didn't help things. Ace and John were told that they could take Christian to the garden only very early in the morning at 6:30 a.m. This meant Christian had no afternoon trip to look forward to. He had to spend the rest of the day in the basement. Then Bill and Virginia made a suggestion. They would build a compound for Christian in their large garden at their house in the country. Ace and John could live there with Christian until it was time to go to Kenya. When the compound was ready, Christian left the King's Road and London forever. Many of his World's End friends came to say goodbye and to watch him leave. It was a sad moment. Ace and John knew that the 5 happy months they had spent with Christian in London were finally over.